Louise Bedford here, the host of the Talking Trading podcast. This is how traders excel. I wanted to kick off today with a story about a showrunner and a writer, Sondra Rhimes. Now, Sondra had a situation where, because she was the writer of Grey's Anatomy as well as Bridgerton, she was such a busy lady, and she knew that she did her best writing in the morning. She found that she had a particular nook in her home, and that's where she wrote. And if she was out of the country, out of her home, she had trouble writing. So she did a clever thing. What she did is that she got a set of noise cancelling headphones. And I know she didn't actually realize she was doing this, but she paired wearing the headphones with writing, because the brain makes associations. It makes incredibly strong connections. Once this happens as a trigger, then I will do this. So for Sondra, that was the answer to her problems. Now, I am very excited to introduce Luke Mathers. Now, Luke and I have known each other through various interviews at various times, and this is his entree into the talking trading world. He is Mr. Habit. So, Curious Habits with Luke Mathers. I love this book. It is actually one that I'd suggest to everybody. It's a winner, and you can see that at the back of Luke as well, sitting there waiting for me to introduce him. You see, effective habits are at the cornerstone of every trader's life. His book has a catch, wait, reset method, and I'm sure he's going to elaborate further. But look, I'd be curious, actually, Luke, what do you think about Sondra's method of pairing first before we kick off?
Oh, I love it. I love the fact, one, it gets rid of the noise, which is obviously a wonderful thing. And we all have a lot of habits that are, I call them noise cancelling habits, funnily enough. And it might be something like your phone keeps going off, and that's basically generating noise saying, look at me, look at me. A noise cancelling habit would be to put that in another room. A noise cancelling habit would be to put it on flight mode. A noise cancelling habit would be to turn it off. All right. So the one thing that you can do that gets rid of a whole bunch of other noise, a whole bunch of other distractions. And so her thing of putting the noise cancelling headphones on, one, it's great because it gets rid of the distractions of noise around. But the fact that that then triggers her is I'm now, Sonia the writer now. She wanders into writing territory then, I think is a wonderful thing, because every habit's got a trigger or a cue, a behavior that you do and a reward at the end. And that obviously worked for her once or twice. So she said, let's go with that, and has doubled down on the things that have helped.
Oh, I love it too, because there's so much in the trading world where we do need to put things on autopilot. We need to do the same thing again and again and again, so that we look at the process rather than the outcome and trust that the outcome will look after itself. I'd love your thoughts about how do we develop and maintain habits? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise going around about that too, and I think there's three steps to it. I think it's awareness, and awareness of what you do. I could almost call it like the hill of habits. There's a little habit you've got to get over to change, and on the one side of the hill, you've got awareness of what you're doing, what are your triggers for doing it, and more importantly, what we're getting out of it. Because there's a lot of habits that we do that are what they call reward invariant, which basically means I've done this habit. I'm continuing to do it. It's not serving me anymore. It's not helping me anymore, but I'm still doing it anyway. So awareness is a good thing for that. So it's one, what gets the habit started, but two, what I'm getting out of it. And once you have awareness, then you have options. Then you have different things that you can do in different ways you can go. And then you've got actions. You've got to try the new one. I've got to try putting my noise cancelling headphones and go into the nook in my room and write Bridgerton. So to be able to then try that, do the actions, and then it goes back to the loop of awareness. Well, did that work? Was that a good thing? Did it help? And to actually take notice of that. And then we get this cycle of loops. And if it works, great, do it again. If it doesn't, what are my other options I could have looked at? And I think when we do that, it all starts with awareness. So without awareness, nothing changes. So to actually, and that's kind of where curious habits come from. It was all about, let's get curious about what we do, and more important, what we're getting out of it. And so if we can change our environment and do things in a way that works out what works best for me, like Sonia did when she found her nook and started writing, then if that works for you, double down on it, go for your life, but always stay curious. There's always going to be a better option.
Because I think a lot of our habits are almost ingrained before we even realize they exist. Like I had one, I'll tell you a little story. I'd love your thoughts about this. I had this person call me a worldwide authority on trading psychology on social media. And a gentleman popped up and said, well, I'm in Europe and I haven't heard of you. And immediately, unfortunately, I wrote back and I said, well, there are a lot of people who live in Europe who wouldn't have heard of me, which I thought was hilarious. However, that was not a good thing because I fed into that comment. What should I have done? What do you think I should have done? What habit should I have become aware that I was automatically knee-jerking for a start? And then what?
Yeah, well, that's what you alluded to it before with catch, wait, and reset, is to be able to catch yourself. Okay, that's just triggered me for a minute. All right. It's an interesting word, trigger. We use trigger a lot for things like unwanted. Your fight or flight response kicked in with this to say, yeah, lots of people live in Europe, bugger off, don't be an a-hole. All right. So that kind of makes sense. But was that going to serve you or not? And that's what catch, wait, and reset's all about. To catch yourself that you're feeling stressed. All right. Catch yourself that something's actually sparked my fight or flight response. And then wait stands for what am I thinking? All right. So what am I thinking? Okay. I'm just thinking you're an asshole for calling this person out when the person's here to help and they've got really good information. All right. And one way to deal with assholes is to fight. One way to deal with assholes is to run. But the other way to work it out is to do whatever you do deliberately. And what happened in that moment is that you probably didn't stop and choice. You just went, no, don't be a dick, and let him have it, which he probably deserved anyway. But that's what catch, wait, and reset's all about. And the reset's part of it. What can I control? Is Control Alt Delete is same with the computer. What can I control? What are my alternatives, and what do I need to get rid of? So to just that moment of pause, I love that sort of Viktor Frankl idea. He was in the Holocaust, and one of his things that he says, between stimulus and response, there's a gap, and in your gap's that ability to choose. And I think what wait does is puts the gap in there. But you've got to have awareness first. You've got to catch yourself that I've just got pissed off by this guy, and then what am I going to do next, and do that deliberately. And from a trading point of view, you're going to get triggered a lot. All right. They're going to, something's dropped 10 points. Holy shit, this is terrible. It's going to trigger you. But then, okay, well, what's my process? How am I going to stick to it? I'm not going to I'm going to use that trigger as a cue to get curious. And I think when we do that, things change.
There's so much in what you said. I just want to unpick this a little bit. So your catch, wait, reset method. So first of all, we're catching ourselves in the act of that automatic transfer from that trigger to action. So we have to become aware of it first. And then
you do. I love that. There's a thing in biology called introspection, and introspection is hearing the signals that your body's sending you. What would yours be, Louise? If something's happened and it's just, oh my God, this is stressful. What does your body tell you? What do you hear
I
from,
get this
from your body?
kind of stomach flip over, and I can feel my heart rate just increase unbelievably. And it is like I'm getting ready to have a punch on. I mean, not that I've ever had a punch on, but I could imagine that, we're ready.
I think you'd be feisty, Louise. I think if you got a punch on, whoever you're punching on with is in all sorts of trouble. But that sort of feeling like, your heart's beating out of your chest, that Bugs Bunny heart coming out like this. Yeah. The knots in your stomach make sense, because what happens is when you trigger a stress response, your body's saying, shit, I've got a fight here. I've got to run or fight. I don't need to worry about digesting lunch. I'm going to get all of that blood flow and all of that from my stomach and send it somewhere else, because I'm going to need it to run or box on. All right. So that sort of knots in your stomach makes sense. And that's what your stress hormones do. They prioritize different things. And you don't need to digest your lunch if you're running away from a tiger, whether your tiger's a real tiger or, something dropping by 10 points. All right. But what happens is your body's going to say, look, don't deal with lunch now. You've got to get ready to fight or flight. But the other hassle is one of the parts of our body that is really, really expensive, uses up a lot of energy, is our prefrontal cortex, our new brain. And the hassle with that is that once we've got triggered into a stress response, the part of our brain that will actually help us make different, better solutions actually goes missing. So one of the things we've got to be able to do is get that sort of new brain back on top of our old brain, which has all the sort of emotional responses, and be able to make a decision that actually is going to help us in the long term. And that's what Catch, Wait and Reset's all about. By waiting and asking yourself questions. Luke loves it when people talk in the third person. It's what that does. It gets the new part of our brain back on board. And when we have that there, then we make considered, logical, responsive responses rather than just a reaction. Because one of the things, the reaction is often the thing that gets you in trouble.
Yes. And in our primal history, reactions were often the things that kept us alive. So it has been reinforced with evolution. I've got something that's come up in my mind just then as you were talking about it. I actually have had a stout, actually a couple, but this one I'll tell you about. I ran to my car because it was dark. It was in a shopping centre. I tried to put the key in the door and the key wouldn't go in. It was in the olden days when you used a key to open the door. Doors, yeah. Just for our younger listeners may not realise in the deep, dark, dank history that that's how we opened car doors back then. And all of a sudden I felt somebody behind me. And I turned around and I kneed him so hard in the part that men don't like to be kneed in. No. And I shoved the palm of my heel of my palm right up through his nose, and I ended up getting blood all over me. And why did I do that? It's because I had done a self-defense course where my friend Graham had reinforced that exact movement. Mm-hmm. It's like to do, bang, bang. And it was an automatic response. So that primal response, and tell me if I'm right, I don't believe has what am I thinking, the wait part, that primal response. Yes.
And you don't want it either. You don't want to sit there and negotiate whether this guy's good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah.
Every now and then it might get you in trouble. The reason the key didn't work is because it was his car, not yours, and you were in all sorts of trouble and you just beat the crap out of some poor bloke. But most of the time in modern day, the primal response, we don't need it, because most of the time we're not getting attacked as we're trying to put our key in the car door. All right. But every now and then it comes in very, very handy. And that's that kind of fight or flight's there for a reason. It's evolutionary. Evolution's a tinkerer. It's going to hang on to things that are useful. And it was really useful at keeping us away from tigers. Whether it's really useful for keeping with your strategy of how you're going to invest your money is probably a little bit different. Sometimes the fight or flight response with that might not be quite so beneficial. So that's where you set up systems and strategies of what you're going to do to actually, that you can stick to and that you believe are going to work.
Yes, and I wonder also if our perception of time alters. Like for me, in that moment, I mean, this is 30 years ago, it is indelibly imprinted in my mind, because that is something that in the future I think I might need to activate. It kept me alive, number one, so I think it changes our memories. But number two, it also in the moment felt like I was doing everything in slow motion. I wasn't. It was super fast. But traders inherently don't think they have time to make decisions. So I think that automatic reaction where they're like, I just have to sell, or I've got to buy now, that is not actually an accurate perception. I wonder what your thoughts are about the elongation of time, and that we do actually have time to make decisions when it is a prefrontal cortex driven decision.
Yeah, well, one of the things about humans is we actually have there's a thing called duration neglect, which actually we don't take as much notice of how long things take as we think. So we're not very good at judging that. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to want to get to comfort as quickly as we can. I'm feeling uncomfortable because this thing's dropped. How am I going to get comfortable as quickly as I can? And that will be, sell, whatever you got to do. All right. Whether that's in line with your long-term strategies or whether you think the company's good or any of those sorts of things. So the hassle is that what we're actually trying to do then is regulate our emotions. And the hassle is that although it's an emotive game, investing is not something where your emotions are generally going to be the best rulers of what to do. So there's a really cool concept I love called a pre-mortem. We've all heard about post-mortem. So someone dies and the coroner cuts them up and they work out how they died. A pre-mortem is to be able to sort of say, okay, when this happens, then I'm going to do this, and you have a strategy for it. I'm someone that's always struggled with weight. Like I'm 6'3" and I'm a big dude. And in recent years, I've managed to get it under control. And one of the things I used was a thing called 15 seconds of willpower. This is completely nothing to do with trading, but it's a good story. Every time I would go and get petrol, I'd also buy soft drink and I'd buy chocolate or something like that. All right. And so what I would say to myself, I knew that was a danger zone. I knew going to get petrol was somewhere where my eating habits would get tested. So I said to myself, have I got 15 seconds of willpower? Yes, I have. Go in there, tap my card. Thanks very much. I'm pump number 4, blah, blah, blah. Walk out and then actually celebrated the fact I went out without chocolate and without soft drinks. And it was just 15 seconds of willpower. And that was my pre-mortem. I knew where the danger zone was. I knew what my trigger was going to be. And I took a deliberate route of what I was going to do when that trigger turned up. And I think that's something that we can do some pre-mortems on how we're going to trade. And if we set a bar, if it drops past this, I'm going to trade it. Or if it's, I don't know much about this stuff. This is definitely more where you would go, but to actually come up with what your strategies are. And when you feel triggered, say, okay, what's my strategy for this stock? And by doing that, we're connecting our brains again.
Yes, the very inner part of our brain, which is the older part, and then the prefrontal cortex, which wraps around that inner part, which is the more modern part, which is the part we really do need for trading. So
exactly,
I want to also talk about that in relation to trading, that 15 seconds of willpower. Now, the big thing that I feel a lot of my traders neglect is, and for those of you that are familiar with trading, you'll know exactly what this means. So I'm going to say it and then I'll describe it. When your macro is off, it's very tempting not to run your scans because you think, well, there's nothing I can do here. There's no opportunity for me. So therefore, why don't I just take this Sunday off? Now, what that actually means for those that are beginners, our macro tells us whether to trade or to not trade based on the presiding market conditions. And you need to come up with your own macro, something I focus on in our mentor program. And the difficulty with that is you get out of the habit of running your scans, you get out of the habit of looking at the market. So maybe a way traders could apply what you've just taught us with that 15 seconds of willpower. I'm going to spend 15 seconds hitting the button to start my scan, because once we initiate, the odds are we're going to want closure and finish off looking at the markets. We very rarely start an action without wanting closure and wanting to finish it. So 15 seconds to kick off your scan, I think, is a great way to approach things. Now, I want to talk about...
I'd actually attach that to something else as well. It's because one of the things is every habit needs a cue to get it started. So what would your cue be to actually do your scans? Is it the moment I sit down at my desk, the first thing I'm going to do is run my scan?
I
just put a trigger in there.
A set time. That's a very good point. I've got an ongoing alarm on my mobile phone, and it's on a Sunday, and that's when I do my scans. So that is my cue. Yeah, you're quite right.
So we can plant those. We can plant cues to get us to do things, because what happens is we're not going to just go to do that thing unless we've either attached it to a habit we've already done. When I come in from my walk on Sunday, that's when I'm going to do that. I take magnesium every day. Magnesium is really good for sleeping. It's really good for brain function. It stops me getting cramps when I go surfing. I kept forgetting to take it. The moment I stacked it, the moment I put that stack that habit against something I was already doing. And in this case, it was when I put my toothbrush down after brushing my teeth, I take my magnesium. So what the habit we were already doing, you're never going to go to bed without brushing your teeth, and get as granular as I can. The moment I put the toothbrush down, I take my magnesium. So attach whatever the thing is that you know you have to do to something that's already happening, and then that becomes your cue to actually perform the thing that you need to perform.
Lovely. And I want to also talk about the reset part, because we've talked about the catch where you've got the introspection to become aware of your potential action. Then you've got the wait. So what am I thinking, to consider what is going on? And then the reset part. Are you purposefully choosing that reset in advance in a pre-mortem way?
Yeah, I think you are. I think because what you're going to do is, what things can I control? Because it's Control Alt Delete. So what things can I control? What are my alternatives, and what do I need to get rid of? What do I need to delete? And one of the things it sounds like in your case you need to delete is the reactivity.
Yes.
The reactivity, I think, might actually be that. And so even to be able to, when you're asking in the wait part, what am I thinking? And even to ask, am I being reactive here, or am I doing this deliberately? And that's it. That's a really cool question. So, yeah, and to even speak to yourself in the third person, to be able to say, righto, Luke, are you being reactive here? That can definitely work.
Yeah,
And so
and
what it
there's
does is, again, puts your
science
brain
to
back
back
in
that. There is definitely science to back that third person concept. And you also talk to yourself in the third person, but you have an alter ego as well.
Yeah,
Carlos.
I do. Carlos, I don't know if I had a picture of Carlos, but yeah, there he is. This is Carlos, and yeah, there's lots of things that Luke's not very good at that Carlos is great at. So Carlos certainly helps me out, and he gives me very good advice. So Carlos is the better version of me. And there's a thing I do. I run stress reset workshops, and one of the things we do is we want to actually understand, a bit like the cartoons there, where those old cartoons where you get an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. We never quite know which one's talking. They both sound very similar. The devil Louise and the angel Louise would sound very, very similar. And so what we want to be able to do is separate those. And I'm really clear now on what little Luke sounds like. And the thing, he's got a little bit of imposter syndrome. He doubts himself a lot and all of this sort of stuff. And I know that Carlos is the better version of me. And Carlos is the one that will say, okay, let's think about this and we're going to go. And he's more driven for action. And I love knowing which one's talking out of those two.
So how can my traders tap into that inner ideal trader?
Yeah, it's a really cool thing to actually work out what are the characteristics of the best version of you, and what are the characteristics of your shadow or your underbelly. All right. And to be out, you got to look back a little bit of your history, particularly for the shadow and the underbelly. But what is the best version of you? And mine, when I did this, and I do a thing called Finding Carlos, which is where you work out what are the characteristics of the best version of you. And mine is, I'm curious, creative, and generous. So if I'm being curious and creative and generous, I'm as happy as a pig in shit. I'm loving life. All right. And I've done this thousands of times now, and everyone comes up with different ones. There's very few that have overlapped. They'll overlap in one or two of the words, but they've got to be the thing that you like about yourself. They've got to be the thing that you aspire to. It's got to have a strength or a value part of it. And I really value being curious, creative, and generous. And my whole job now is I find good ideas. I'm curious. I add to them, which is creative, and I'm generous, and I share them. So I find new ideas, add to them, and share them. It's what I do for a job.
I think really the way we do one thing is the way we do everything as well. So if we can apply those higher level values to every area of our life, that can really keep us in alignment. I have, with my traders, suggested that they visualize who they want to be 5 years down the track, and then backfill to accommodate all of the scaffolded steps to achieve that level. And I think that's a very similar thing to what you're discussing here. I think with Carlos, though, it is interesting to me that you've chosen somebody who looks like the guy from Breaking Bad.
Carlos, it's a long story. I'm really bad at DIY, and one year I had a mustache, and I built a deck at a holiday house that we had. We had a house in Byron Bay, and I couldn't get the grass to grow, so I had a mustache, and I built a deck out the back because I couldn't get tradies to come because Byron Bay they're all stoned and no one will come and help. So I had a mustache and. One of the jokes was Luke couldn't possibly have done this because it's amazing. This was Carlos, the Colombian drug dealer. And that's where Carlos was born. But it's a really cool thing. Well, one of the things, going back to what you were saying about getting them to get clear about what they want to be down the track, most of the time when we do that, we pick extrinsic things. I want to get to 5 million in my portfolio. I want to do this. I want to pay off my house, whatever those things. All right. And they're cool. I love them. But I think there's a hierarchy of goals. And I think those ones need to sit second on the line. I think the top of the hierarchy of goals needs to be intrinsic. It needs to be intentional, and it needs to be infinite. It should be something that you're never going to reach, almost like an asymptote. You're going to get close to it, but you're never going to reach it. And if it's intrinsic, intentional, and infinite, then it becomes part of being you. When I'm 80 years old, I still want to be curious, creative, and generous. So have those ones as the top, and then you can have the next ones with the more extrinsic goals about what you want to achieve and the targets and the things you want to hit. And I think it's really important to have those extrinsic goals, those intrinsic goals that are, this is the type of human I want to be. And that's where Carlos comes in. What would Carlos do? He's curious, creative, and generous. He's going to find a solution. So say I'm having an argument with my wife, and we've been married 28 years, and we don't argue too much. But if we are, and we have done, as every couple does, am I being curious about her point of view? Am I being creative about finding a solution we both like? Am I being generous with my time and my energy? And almost every single time, if we're not getting on well, I'm not. So the best version of me is not turning up. Because when the best version of me and the best version of her turn up, we do amazing things. We're great, right? The only time we fight is when the best version of me doesn't turn up. But you've got to know what that best version is.
Is that where your thoughts about time rich and purpose rich come into it as well?
Yeah, it does a bit. One of my goals now is how can I design my life so that I'm time rich and purpose rich. One of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm writing a book. The working title of it is Next Step at the moment, and it's watching people make that transitions between finishing their time at work, and often they're just counting it down in a way that's not very productive, and then starting their time in retirement, but they think it would be wonderful. And in a lot of cases, it actually ends up in misery. They're not very happy at all because they become purpose poor. They don't really have any sort of goal or intentions and things they want to do. So we go from being very time poor and purpose rich when we're working to being very time rich and purpose poor. And I think there's a way that we can balance both of those. And we can balance both of those by being in service to other people, to be really deliberate about what we say yes and what we say no to. And I think one of the problems is we default to more. Yeah, everything in the world is saying more is better. And maybe it's not. Maybe the goalposts there have moved. Maybe we've got to change it. It's not about more. It's about how can I give this the freedom to be able to do what I want to do. And it's a privileged conversation. If you're struggling to pay the rent and keep a roof over your head, you've got to look after the sort of Maslow, the bottom half of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs first. But if they're taken care of, how much would an extra $1 million change your life? One of my neighbours, he's moved out recently, but he was 100 odd kilos, and he was a insolvency lawyer. So it was very, very busy, very, very stressful. And he said he looked at himself in the mirror and he thought, what would I give to be 75 kilos again and fit and healthy and well and happy? And he worked out he would give $1 million to do that. So he said, okay, what part of my business can I cut off, even if it costs me $1 million, so that I can have a life that's time rich and purpose rich? And he did it, which is the really big part. He actually did it. And, he's as happy a human as I think I know, because he still has purpose. He still has drive. He still has things he wants to achieve, but they're not completely encompassing all of his time. So to be time rich and purpose rich and be able to put the demarcations between it. I'm going to do this for X amount of time, and then I'm going to go there. And sort of, there's a great expression called "be where your feet are," which I really love. A guy called Scott O'Neill.
Bloom where you're planted. It's similar.
Yeah, bloom where you're planted. Lovely one. Yeah, those sorts of things. And so this is the situation that I have. And how can I make sure if I'm walking on the beach, I'm walking on the beach. I'm not thinking about work. If I'm playing golf, I'm playing golf. I'm not thinking about work. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. And if we can do that, and your writer Sonia, who you talked about at the start, when she sat in her nook and she put her noise cancelling headphones, she bloomed where she was planted. And I think one of the things that in society, I actually have a thing called shiny squirrel syndrome. All right, my wife bought me this, and shiny squirrel syndrome is basically there's so many distractions in our world that it's really easy to go, hey, look, something shiny, and off you go. How can you actually be present, bloom where you planted, and be where your feet are, or whatever expression you want to use? And there's a lot of research into this about duration, path, and outcome. Here's how long I'm going to do it. This is the path I want to get, and this is the outcome I want to get, and really demarcate those. Because otherwise, particularly with things like trading, you can get sucked into rabbit holes and be in there and not very productive, but in there a lot.
Yeah,
so how can
busy.
I get duration, path, outcome? Yeah, feeling. The key word there is feeling, isn't it? You're not, whether you're actually achieving anything is another thing. So if we can sort our life out so that we're purpose rich and time rich. I actually think particularly a lot of your older traders are sort of, north of their mid 40s. I think those ones can really benefit from having that as their infinite goal. I want to be purpose rich and time rich, and really embrace their time when they're sitting in front of the computer doing their analysis, running their, I don't know your terms, but running their things so that they're doing it all properly. But then when they're not do that, to be able to be free to go and do the things that they want to do, that's going to bring them joy.
This is absolutely critical if you're considering going full-time as a trader. A lot of traders don't plan. I do remember a conversation I had several years ago with Peter Hunt. Now, Peter Hunt is a member of our mentor program. He was actually a member of our very first mentor program over 2 decades ago. And he came to my business partner, Chris Tate, and I, and he said, this is my 798-day plan. And we're like, what? And it was a retirement plan. So he did exactly what you have suggested. He looked at the time available to a particular deadline. He planned it out, and he also planned beyond that point so that he wasn't bored. He didn't tinker with this plan. He still had activities to intellectually stimulate him. And as a result, that's probably one of the most successful retirement plans that we've ever seen put together. He had all of the aspects there for that pre-mortem concept, and he was able to implement it within just a few days of that 798-day plan when he initially showed us, which was just, to me, a beautiful thing to watch. And I think a lot of people in the midst of this type of planning can get sucked in by their own drama. That shiny squirrel that you showed everybody on the youtube.com/trading game channel just then, that is a distraction, but there's also inherent drama that accompanies this. I know that you like the research by Stephen Karpman, and it's about the drama triangle. Now, I'd love you to describe this for our traders.
Yeah, the drama triangle is, Stephen Karpman invented this back in the 70s, so it's really stood the test of time. And I love all of those old ones. I love actually going back and reading some of those old books, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and that sort of stuff. The drama triangle, and everyone listening is going to think about this. That they're going to, everyone enters the drama triangle from one point, but we can all wander around all of it very quickly. And if you imagine an equilateral triangle with the flat part at the top, one corner will be the rescuer, the person that says, here's the problem, I'm going to ride in on my white horse and look how clever I am, and I'm going to fix the problem. All right. And a lot of us probably enter the drama triangle from there. We enter it with the best intentions, which is lovely. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The next part across the top of it is the persecutor. And the persecutor looks at the drama going on and says, oh, this is terrible, it's your fault, and points fingers. All right. And both of those two across the top is there's a judgment to it. And the judgment is, I know more than you do, I'm better than you, and there's something wrong here. Either I need to help or I need to point out who's to blame. So there's a judgment along there. But both of them also feed down in the triangle, down to the bottom. And the bottom character in the drama triangle is the victim. And the victim is that, oh, poor me, I have to fix this up. The victim is, oh, poor me, this has cost me a fortune. Oh, poor me is basically the catch cry of the victim. And on one side, you've got the rescuer going to a victim, and that just is the scent of burning martyr. It's just like, oh, I'm going to come in and fix up. Oh, now I have to do everything, and oh, it's terrible. There's a whole martyrdom to that. And the persecutor going into victim just turns into the cynic. That cynical way of looking at things is, oh, everything's crap. It's always going to be crap. And we all know a few cynics in our world. All right. And what happens is, I love the concept that cynics are the people that are given up, but they haven't yet shut up. And we've all met a whole bunch of those. All right. But all of that triangle basically just ends up feeding itself. I'm going to come in and try and fix it up. Oh shit, whose fault was that? Oh, I'm going to have to fix it up. And all of a sudden we've wandered around this triangle. So I guess the key is, how do we step out of that? And then again, it comes down to awareness, options, and actions. And instead of being the rescuer, be the coach, help that other person deal with whatever they've got going on, and ask questions rather than telling. I think we jump to, Michael Bungay Stanier has a great expression called your advice monster. And I think our advice monster, particularly with family and particularly with our kids, comes out way too quickly. So tame your advice monster a little bit and be able to sort of say, okay, let's ask some questions, some truly curious questions that might get them where they need to go. The persecutor might have to just hold their judgment for a little bit and be a little bit more curious about what to do. And the victim turns into someone who learns. So if we're learning from that mistake and having a really valid idea of what to do next time, then I think we sort of step out of the drama triangle and don't keep sort of circling around it and punching all corners of it. So yeah,
I always get so much out of hearing your views. I think as a trader, the thing that I'm taking out of that is, be careful of the role that you're putting yourself in. Question that role. Are you saying to yourself, well, I'm the breadwinner, I have to make this work, and adding extra pressure onto yourself, and not seeing that perhaps that's something that you have self-diagnosed and you've painted yourself into a corner. Yeah.
I think a lot of the programs you have tap into a things called expectation theory, which is another one from back in the 70s. And expectation theory is, do I have a plan that I think will work? If I do your plan of how to trade and what to do and what are the key things you got to look for and stuff, if I do that, do I think it'll work? Can I do the plan? And if I do the plan, will it come out the way I want it to? And if all of those three line up, then absolutely I expect this to happen. All right. So to be able to sort of put it into that is, have I got a plan that's going to work? Can I do the plan? And if the plan does, it's going to work, then I think we have expectation that we're okay. And that helps us stay online, that we're going to get some ups and downs, and that's okay too. We're not going to let them trigger us into changing our strategy that we know is actually beneficial, because it's helped thousands and thousands of people in the past.
Yeah. Oh, look, I want to tell everybody how we first bonded. And I think that this will be a lovely way to wrap up what we've been discussing today, because it's a good summary of your catch weight reset. Now, one of the things that I've done for quite a while, and I've barely ever discussed this with my traders, is when I have detected those feelings, that stomach turning over, my heart racing, either because I've made a big profit or I'm about to hit a stop and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just dropped through my stop. That type of emotive response to candles on the screen. What I do is, because I've been able to recognize that in the past, I've actually teamed that with a sound, and I have played that sound. I won't do it right now because of copyright, but I'm going to say what this sound is, and I'm pretty sure everybody will recognize it from a very popular streaming service. Da-dong.
I'm giggling to myself. We talked about this about a year ago on another thing. And I do it now. When I push my computer down, I actually do your little something clicks da-dung at the end. And I've done it ever since we had that chat. I love it because
that's
it
fantastic.
demarcates this is the end of my workday. I'm going to go do whatever I'm going to do now. And whatever I've just closed, I'm not looking at that until I'm looking at that. And I think that's where that duration path outcome stuff comes from.
Yeah.
That if we can sort of put a demarcation and put something that says, that's the end of my workday, I'm out of this rabbit hole, I'm going to be time rich somewhere else now. I think we can actually end up with lots of happier, healthier traders.
That's a beautiful thing. And I also do it when I'm mid-trade in the middle of the day, and I've teamed that sound, paired it with an action where I actually push away from my desk. I've got a chair that has wheels on it, and I hear the sound, or I'll actually manufacture the sound, and then I push away from the desk, which allows me to examine, what am I thinking? I can do some deep breaths, I can calm down, I can start to enter that more rational self because I have put a break between that stimulus and the response. And then by the time I pull myself back into the trading desk, I've been able to reset where my emotions are flying to and to become more rational. And I love that because even though we didn't know each other when I came up with that method, your theory gives structure to what I have been doing. And that, especially for that, I definitely thank you. And I do suggest everybody does aim to apply what Luke is saying. Now, Luke, you've got a beautiful website, lukemathers.com.au. Now, is there something there that people should come to visit for? And what do you think people's next step should be?
You can definitely go there to get copies of both Reset and Stress Teflon are both there, and you can download a free PDF of both of those two. Curious Habits, you'll have to go to Amazon to get because I have a publisher for that one who wants to. They want to get theirs. You can also, if you type in Reset Luke Mathers into where you hear your podcasts, the actual audiobook of both of those is available for free as well. Lots of stuff on my website you can actually have a look at. Lots of things for free. There's actually even a outline for finding Carlos on there that you can find as well. So you can actually work out what your sort of trademark traits are or what your infinite goals are. So there's a worksheet that you can use for that, which is a whole bunch of fun to do with family or friends or things like that. So all of that you can find at lukemathers.com.au.
Luke, you are just such a gift in my life. I adore following your email trail. Every email does inform me about some different strategy or technique, and I've been able to apply those directly to my trading. So I'm definitely going to get you back on the show. I love what we've chatted about, and stay tuned because next week we have another wonderful Talking Trading episode coming out, and I do urge you to rate and subscribe to our episodes. Now, the rating really does count, especially if you do that through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find the show. Any parting words, Luke?
Good. No, that was the wrong word, but always a pleasure to talk to Louise. So yeah, I think if we can just help people be a little bit more deliberate and responsive when they come up with really stressful times, I think it can actually and sort of demarcate our days a little bit better. I think both of those things, particularly when you're a trader and the opportunity to work lots and lots of hours is there, whether that's beneficial or not is another thing. So let's sort of do whatever we do from now on nice and deliberately.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Luke. Bye.
My pleasure.